Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakah, Hakwadash, Barakatha. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, the great millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to Yakim out there pushing this word in truth. This is the Brother Ride with another video, and the article I'm going to be using today is talking about a ATM hacking thing that's been going on around the world. And this could very well lead to the Mark of the Beast system, since this is the year of prophecy. And the title of the article is "A Devastating ATM Hack Swept the World and Finally Hit the U.S." And it's on Wired.com. In July 2016, ATM hackers in Taiwan raked in more than 2 million using a new type of malware attack that manipulated machines into spitting out tons of cash. And Taiwan is close to China and North Korea, so if they did use this to implement a financial meltdown and wanted to blame it on somebody else, they could trace it back to Taiwan and then say they further traced it back to either China or North Korea. The method, dubbed jackpotting, quickly spread across parts of Asia, Europe, and Central America, resulting in tens of millions of dollars of stolen cash. By November 2016, the FBI issued a warning that well-resourced and organized malicious cyber actors have intentions to target the U.S. financial sector using this approach, but it took a year for the attack to arrive stateside. This week, the Secret Service began warning financial institutions about a rash of jackpotting attacks across the U.S. and the threat that more could be coming. In a jackpotting attack, hackers, often dressed as technicians to deflect suspicion, penetrate an ATM's physical and digital security, install malware, establish remote access, and set it up to display an out-of-order screen. With those hardware and software modifications in place, another attacker can approach the compromised ATM and stand with a bag while co-conspirators remotely instruct it to dispense cash. In past incidents, law enforcement observed a cash flow rate of 40 bills every 23 seconds. Coming to America. So far, jackpotting attacks in the U.S. have largely targeted standalone ATMs, like the ones you might see at pharmacies or big box stores, and have already cropped up in numerous regions including the Pacific Northwest, New England, and the Gulf. ATM manufacturers of financial institutions and law enforcement agencies are now scrambling to defend the 400,000 ATMs in the U.S. against further jackpotting attempts, and to figure out what took it so long to get here. And in this article, it states that these jackpotting attacks first started off in third world and developing countries before moving on to the U.S. And how I see it is that they could be doing that in order to test out the kinks to this system in those other countries before running it in the U.S. so it can run without a hitch. While there is no way to give a definitive answer, there are two predominant schools of thought, says Secret Service Special Agent Matthew Quinn. First, financial fraud is cyclical. Attack one region locally or globally and move on before apprehension or after law enforcement exposure. The second often revolves around ease of entry. Organized transnational criminal groups may first target a region with less law enforcement presence and less restrictive means of entry. The U.S. has extensive law enforcement capabilities, making other countries, particularly developing nations, safer training grounds for perfecting malicious techniques. But recently, jackpotting has been slowly easing into the U.S. Krebs on Security, which first reported on the Secret Service advisory earlier this week, also notes that there were some preliminary jackpotting attacks in Wyoming in November. And Wyoming is a less metropolitan area than, say, New York, so it'd be smart to test it out in Wyoming, which is more rural, before moving on to a more populated industrial place. The physical access component is crucial to why there haven't been more jackpotting attacks in the U.S., according to Daniel Regalado, principal security researcher at the Internet of Things defense firm Zingbox. In the context of developing countries, it's easy to open up the box, no one is going to spot you, or it's easy to bribe the cops. Physical access is not a problem, says Rigolaldo, who has tracked jackpotting malware for years. When you come to the US, things are different. In 5 minutes, the cops are going to arrive, or they are already tracking you from a previous jackpot. ATM security is also stronger in the US than in some countries because the banks can afford to regularly upgrade their devices with new hardware and software protections. The ATMs attackers have hit in the US so far all appear to be old models made by Diebold Nixdorf, and Regolaldo notes that when companies replace ATMs in moneyed countries, they often sell the old models to developing nations, another reason jackpotting is easier outside of the US. The malware attackers have been using in these recent attacks, known as Plutus D, originated in Latin America and does have other variants that can target more recent models of ATMs from vendors beyond Diebold, but Rigolaldo is skeptical that jackpotting will truly take off in the US. I don't understand, to be honest, why they're coming to the US when it's so much harder to do the attacks than what they've been doing in other countries, he says. And as that saying goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And if something like this could cause a major problem in the US, people would panic and look for a solution, such as getting that chip. A jackpot in the US is definitely better than one in an ATM in Mexico or another Latin American country because the currency is worth more, but there's a big risk of getting caught, cashing out. Nonetheless, US ATM security isn't stellar, even if it is above average. Jackpotting is nothing new. The manufacturers play cat and mouse, but still haven't been able to fix it, says David Kennedy, the former chief security officer of Diebold, who now runs the corporate security consulting firm TrustedSec. ATM manufacturers should be protecting the product they sell, but also most of the security enhancements to ATMs are removed by banks, or they won't pay for additional security on the devices. Most banks treat ATMs as standalone devices with few security controls. Diebold said in a client advisory on Thursday that customers should implement the same countermeasures the company has recommended during past jackpotting waves, like installing the latest firmware updates, which those firmware updates could very well have a version of the jackpotting malware in it to make it more easy to hack into people's accounts, using robust physical ATM locks and adding two-factor authentication to ATM access controls. Diebold hinted, though, that many financial institutions may not have heeded this advice, noting that the recommendations should be deployed if not already implemented. And if this is what they end up using to create a financial meltdown in order to bring the mark of the beast into play, the heads of these financial institutions are not going to do anything since they rub shoulders with the elites and they want this plan to run as smoothly as possible. While there are important software protections that manufacturers and financial institutions can implement on ATMs, like strict limits on a device's ability to run foreign code, Zingbox's Rigolaldo argues that ultimately ATM protections need to be physical, since hackers are already relying on physical access to carry out their attacks. You can have the latest and greatest software solution, but with physical access, they figure out ways to remove the protections, he says. This is not a software problem, it's a hardware problem, and you wouldn't have to worry about your ATMs or your accounts getting hacked if you carried it in your hand with, say, a chip, you see? In comparison to some other countries, communications about these types of threats, law enforcement action, and regulations all move relatively quickly in the US, thanks to specialized groups like the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. As a result, TrustedSec's Kennedy agrees that jackpotting isn't likely to be as widespread in the US as the law enforcement warnings might make it to seem, but we'll just have to see, with this being the year of prophecy. But the threat certainly merits precautions from financial institutions and can also serve as a vital reminder about the ongoing need to invest in strong ATM security. If you get a sketchy vibe off of someone loitering around an ATM for too long, tell someone, especially if you see them collecting a waterfall of cash. So as you brothers can see, this jackpotting thing could turn out to be something very important, and may be what leads to the financial meltdown and the mark of the beast. And I got a few scriptures. Revelations 13 and 16 through 17. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And say that this jackpotting thing leads to something bigger that infects more than ATMs, and it infects entire financial institutions and takes away everybody's money. People can't even go 2 hours without electricity. So imagine if they lost all their savings, they'd go crazy, and they'd take anything that the government brought in to ease the situation, especially if it was a chip that could restore most of what they lost. But if you do get that chip, which I hope myself and any of the other hopeful elect don't get, the only thing you have to look forward to is in Revelations 14 and 9 through 10. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of the Most High, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, those nuclear missiles, in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb Yahushai. So we just got to pray out there, brothers, that we have the strength to endure and not get this chip. And with that, I hope you were edified. Until next time, Shalom.